The Georgian ethnic formation began around 500 BC when the native Caucasian groups mixed with the incoming Indo-European peoples from Anatolia. By 300 BC, two Georgian regions had emerged. The West Georgian kingdom, referred to by the Greeks who settled its Black Sea coast as Colchis, and the East Georgian kingdom of Kartli with its capital at Mitcheta. By the Christian era, Rome had gained control over the western region. Byzantium and Iran fought over eastern Georgia until the Arabs conquered the entire territory. The Arab conquest brought most of Georgia under a single authority, although a number of Georgian princes continued to govern as vassals of the Arabs. Between the 7th and 9th centuries, Georgia suffered the consequences of the Arab Byzantine conflict and the invasion of the Khazars. Several autonomous states emerged under feudal lords. Georgia was finally united for the first time in its history at the start of the 11th century when Bagrat III of the Armenian Bagratids, which is a dynasty supported by the peasants, artisans, merchants, and especially the Georgian church, established himself as king. The new kingdom managed to repulse the Turkish onslaught, something the Byzantines, who had destroyed Armenia earlier, could not do, resulting in the Turkish invasion of Armenia. Bagrat's successors, especially David the Builder and Queen Tamar, made Georgia the most powerful state in Transcaucasia. Tbilisi became the main center, and Georgia's golden age of arts, architecture, and literature was ushered, and also the future capital. The Mongol invasion ended this splendor, and by 1243, all of Georgia was subjugated and had to pay tribute in money or troops. By the 15th century, Georgia had broken up into three Bagratid kingdoms and five principalities. The 16th to the 18th centuries witnessed Georgia, like Armenia, suffering the devastating wars between the Iranian Safavids and the Ottoman Turks, who took many Georgians as slaves. The fall of the Safavids made a final Georgian revival, under King Erikl II, possible. Realizing his precarious position, Erikl sought a strong Christian ally. Religious and geographical considerations made Russia the obvious choice. In 1783, Georgia signed the Treaty of Georgievsk and placed itself under the protection of Russia, which annexed parts of Georgia at the start of the 19th century and the rest by the mid 19th century. Russian rule brought great prosperity to Georgia. The population increased fivefold by World War I. Tbilisi became the center of the Russian administration of the Caucasus and the seat of the viceroy. Oil pipelines and railroads connected Tbilisi to the ports of Baku, Poti, and Batum. Georgian and Armenian cultural revivals of the 19th century began in Tbilisi. Soon the Russians controlled the administration, the Armenians the economy, while the Georgians, mostly farmers and artisans, were the least powerful group. Russian rule brought Western political ideas as well as the Georgian Social Democrats became a major force in Russian politics. Following the Russian Revolution and during the Russian Civil War, Georgia, in March of 1918, separated itself from the empire and, together with Armenia and Azerbaijan, became part of the Transcaucasian Republic. On May 26th of 1918, Georgia left the Federation and declared its independence under Menshevik's rule. However, this was cut short by Russia's violation of the Treaty of Moscow and the Red Army invasion of Georgia, which ended the country's sovereignty and transformed it into a Soviet republic until the dissolution of the Soviet Union. In February of 1921, Georgia was so Sovietized and, together with Armenia and Azerbaijan, became part of the Transcaucasian Socialist Federation Soviet Republic in 1922. On December 5th of 1936, Georgia, together with Armenia and Azerbaijan, became a separate constituent republic of the USSR. The Adzar, Abkhaz, and South Ossetian territories became autonomous regions under Georgian rule, as Nagorno-Karabakh was in Azerbaijan. During the Stalin era, who was Georgian, Georgia was ruled by the notorious Beria, who was responsible for the purge of scores of intellectuals and the halting of nativization. After the death of Stalin in 1953, Mezavaradze became first secretary of the Communist Party. The Khrushchev and Brezhnev eras at first encouraged national development, then followed the policy of benign neglect. In 1972, Mezavaradze was accused of corruption and was finally removed from office to be replaced with Eduard Shevardnadze. Despite the negative effects of this policy, a national elite as well as a new nationalism emerged in Georgia, as in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Shevardnadze became responsible for reorganizing Georgia and resolving the clashes and demonstrations in the autonomous regions populated by minorities. In spring of 1978, Georgia was the first Transcaucasian republic to cry out against the attempt by the new Soviet constitutional debate to remove the native language as the official language of the republic. Georgian pressure removed that clause from the proposed constitution. During the Gorbachev period, various demonstrations against the nuclear reactor at Medcheta and in favor of the preservation of Georgian culture in Abkhazia and Ossetia occurred. The Georgian National Independence Party rose to prominence, and the elections of September 1990 brought Gamsakhurdia into the forefront. On March 31st of 1991, Gamsakhurdia organized a referendum on independence, which was approved by 98.9% of the votes. Formal independence from the Soviet Union was declared on April 9th of 1991, although it took some time before it was widely recognized by outside powers, such as the United States and European countries. Gamsakhurdia's government strongly opposed any vestiges of Russian dominance, such as the remaining Soviet military bases in the republic, and after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, his government declined to join the Commonwealth of Independent States, or CIS. His anti-democratic policies eventually toppled him from power in 1991 and brought Shevardnadze into power in 1992. The new government fought against the separatist group in Abkhazia, which had Russian support, and they lost, leading to Georgians being driven out of the entire territory. The same nearly happened with nearby South Ossetia, but was eventually quelled. But Ossetia is still under massive Russian influence, just not to the same degree as Abkhazia to the west. The current Republic of Georgia has been independent since 1991. For much of the 21st century, Georgia pursued a strongly pro-Western foreign policy, introducing a series of reforms aimed at integration into the European Union and NATO. This Western orientation led to worsening relations with Russia, culminating in the Russo-Georgian War. On December 14th of 2023, the European Union granted Georgia candidate status, acknowledging the nation's ongoing efforts towards European Union integration. The decision announced by the European Council came alongside the initiation of accession negotiations with Eastern Partnership members, Ukraine and Moldova. Georgia's application for EU membership in March of 2022, prompted by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, was initially met with a denial of candidate status in June of 2022. The Council outlined 12 priorities for Georgia to address before reconsidering its candidacy. Despite the limited process on these recommendations, the EU's decision reflected an ongoing commitment to fostering diplomatic relations with Georgia and advancing the nation's EU integration aspirations. That is it for the history, or the simplified history of Georgia, the country. So on to the fun facts. The first fact is that the nation of Georgia was home to the very first Europeans, as we know by the oldest skeletal remains of a human was found in Georgia. The second fun fact is that Europe's highest settlement is in Georgia, being the villages of Ushguli. The third fact, which I mentioned, is that the most infamous leader of the USSR, Joseph Stalin, was born in Georgia and not Russia. The fourth fact is that Georgia has the deepest cave in the entire world. And the fifth and last fact is that the Georgian script is one of the four Kartvelian languages, the other three being much more minor languages either inside Georgia or northeast Turkey, making Georgian one of the most unique languages in Europe and maybe the world. Anyways, that is it for the simplified history of Georgia.